My dad threw me out to make space for his perfect son, but now they're begging me to take the blame for his crime, or they'll face prison. I'm 25, male, and my family's always been a disaster. My parents divorced when I was about 10. It was messy, and I mostly stayed with my mom after that. But my dad remarried when I was 12, and suddenly I had a new stepmom, Dee, and her son, T. T was 6 years younger than me, so when we first met, he was just a little kid. And honestly, I didn't mind him at first. I figured it was just another adjustment I'd have to deal with, but as the years went on, it became really clear that things weren't fair. T was always the favorite. He could do no wrong, even when he messed up. And believe me, he messed up a lot. It was always excused. If I did something wrong, it was a huge deal. My dad would yell, ground me, lecture me for hours. But he'd get a pat on the head and told to do better next time. It didn't take long for me to realize that no matter what I did, I'd always come second to T. I spent most of my teenage years keeping my head down, just trying to get through it. By the time I was 18, I couldn't wait to move out. I went off to college, worked 2 jobs to support myself, and barely spoke to my dad and his new family. I didn't need the constant reminder that I wasn't good enough for them, and honestly, I thought that was that. I figured I'd keep my distance, and eventually they'd fade out of my life for good. But about a year ago, everything blew up. I had been living on my own for a couple of years, working full-time, and finally starting to feel like I had my life together. Out of nowhere, I got a call from my dad. It was weird because we hadn't spoken much in months, but I picked up, thinking maybe something had happened. He said, in this tone that immediately put me on edge. It wasn't the usual friendly, "Have you been call?" No, this sounded serious. "Listen, we need to talk." That's when he dropped the bombshell. T had dropped out of college and was living back at home. Apparently, he'd blown through his savings, wasn't working, and was just hanging out at the house all day, burning through Dad's money. And now, they were struggling financially. My dad had the nerve to ask if I could move back in and help out, meaning help support T. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, busting my ass to make a living, while T was sitting at home doing nothing, and they wanted me to come back and take care of him? It was absurd. I told my dad no, that I wasn't going to upend my life to bail out T, and we ended the conversation on bad terms. I figured that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few weeks later, I came home to find a letter taped to my apartment door. It was from my landlord, saying my lease had been terminated. Apparently, my dad had convinced him that I was moving back in with my family, and without bothering to check with me, my apartment had been rented out to someone else. I was furious. My dad had gone behind my back, sabotaging my living situation to force me to come home. I called him, livid, but he just brushed it off, saying that family comes first and that T needed help. I hung up on him and crashed at a friend's place for a while, until I could sort things out. It was humiliating, but I managed to find another apartment a few weeks later. I swore to myself I'd cut contact with my dad for good after that. But as you'll see, that wasn't the end of it. About 6 months later, I got another phone call. This time, it was my stepmom, Dee, and she sounded frantic. I'll never forget that call. "T's in trouble," she said, her voice shaking. "The police found drugs in the house. They're saying they were his, but if this goes to court, we could all go down for it." I didn't say anything. I didn't even know how to respond. "We need your help, she continued. "You've got to tell the police they were yours." That's when I snapped back into reality. "Wait, what? You want me to say the drugs were mine?" "It's the only way," she said, her voice firming up. "You don't have a record. You'll get off with a slap on the wrist, maybe some community service. But he can't handle this. If he gets charged, he could go to prison." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to lie to the police, take the fall for T, to keep him out of prison. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. All the years of being second best, of being used and discarded when it was convenient for them, came flooding back. "No," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm not going to do that. T messed up, and he needs to face the consequences. She didn't take it well. After everything we've done for you, she spat, her tone turning cold. You can't even help your family? I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they'd realize that I wasn't going to bail them out and deal with the mess themselves. But I was wrong. Again. The next few days were quiet, but then weird things started happening. Friends of mine began asking why they were hearing that I was involved in drugs. One of my coworkers pulled me aside, saying he'd heard rumors I'd been in trouble with the law. It didn't take long for me to figure out what was going on. My dad and Dee were spreading lies about me. They were telling the family, and apparently anyone else who'd listen, that I was the one responsible for the drugs, that I had gotten T into trouble, that I had been involved in drug dealing and was just trying to cover my tracks. They were trying to ruin my reputation so that I'd have no choice but to take the fall for T. I was furious. The one thing I'd been trying to do was distance myself from their mess, and now they were dragging me down with them. I confronted my dad over the phone, demanding to know why they were spreading lies about me. We need you to do this, he said, his voice calm like he was asking me to pick up some groceries, not ruin my life. You're stronger than T. You've always been able to handle more. He can't go to prison. He won't survive it. I'm not lying for him, I shot back. He made his choices. He needs to face the consequences. And if you don't stop spreading these lies, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. There was a pause on the other end. You're making a mistake, my dad finally said, his voice low and threatening. You don't know what you're up against. I hung up, shaking with anger. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let them ruin my life. So I started gathering evidence. I saved all the text messages from Dee, recorded phone calls, and even collected statements from friends who had heard the rumors. I wasn't about to let them get away with this. Then I went public. I reached out to every family member I could think of, explained the situation, and showed them the proof. I made it clear that I wasn't involved in any of the drug stuff, that my dad and Dee were trying to manipulate me into taking the fall for T. I even went to a lawyer to see what my options were in case they tried to escalate things legally. Most of my family was shocked. Some didn't believe me at first, but once they saw the evidence, they realized just how deep the manipulation went. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire family knew the truth. My dad and Dee didn't take it well. They tried to play the victim, claiming I was turning the family against them and that I was being selfish. But it didn't matter. They couldn't hide behind their lies anymore. Enough people had seen the truth, and their little parade was crumbling. As for T, the cops figured out pretty quickly that the drugs were his. He was arrested, and last I heard, he's facing serious jail time. It's ironic, really. After everything my dad and Dee did to protect him, he still ended up paying the price for his actions, and they lost almost everything in the process. Most of the family cut ties with them after that. Dad lost his job when word got out about the drug case, and Dee's reputation in the community took a massive hit. They've tried reaching out to me. They've tried reaching out to me a few times since everything went down. Calls, texts, even letters. At first, they played the guilt card, sending messages like, "We're still your family, and this has all been a huge misunderstanding." When that didn't work, they shifted to desperation, begging me to meet with them, saying we could work things out. They even went so far as to tell me that T had learned his lesson and that they needed me to help smooth things over with the rest of the family. I ignored all of it. Every single message, every attempt to pull me back into their mess, I shut down. After all they'd done, after the length they went to in order to protect T and destroy me in the process, there was no way I was going back to them. Not this time. It wasn't easy, though. I won't pretend cutting them out didn't hurt. As messed up as things were, they were still my family, and a part of me kept hoping, irrationally, that maybe they'd finally admit they were wrong, that they'd apologize, and make things right. But that apology never came. They couldn't admit their golden child had failed them, and they sure as hell couldn't admit that they treated me like a disposable backup plan my entire life. After the truth came out, I felt a mix of vindication and emptiness. On one hand, I was relieved. I had exposed their lies, cleared my name, and finally stood up for myself after years of being their doormat. But on the other hand, I'd lost my dad. The man who was supposed to be my protector had turned into the person who tried to ruin me. There's no way to come back from that. It wasn't just about T anymore. It was about how little I'd meant to them all along. As for T, he got exactly what was coming to him. It took a few months, but he was officially charged with possession with intent to distribute, and the case against him was airtight. There was no way out. The last I heard, he'd taken a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, but he's still looking at a few years in prison. The irony of it all? My dad and Dee bent over backward trying to protect him, and yet he still ended up in exactly the place they feared the most. They sacrificed their relationship with me, their reputations, and their standing in the family for him. And for what? T's going to prison, and they're left with nothing. The rest of the family distanced themselves from my dad and Dee after everything came to light. A few of my relatives reached out to me, offering their support, apologizing for believing the lies in the first place. It was nice to know I wasn't completely alone in this, but the damage was done. Some relationships were strained beyond repair. Even though they knew the truth now, the fact that so many of them had believed the worst about me without asking questions, that stung. Trust doesn't just magically rebuild itself. I moved on, slowly but surely. I focused on my job, on rebuilding my life without them. I found a new place to live, far away from where I grew up, and started fresh. I cut off all contact with my dad, Dee, and T, and honestly, I've never felt more free. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more guilt. I didn't realize how much of a weight they had been on me until I finally let them go for good. Of course, my dad and Dee didn't make that easy. They tried to stir up more drama with the rest of the family, painting themselves as victims, claiming I'd turned everyone against them out of spite. But by then, most people saw through their act. The evidence was undeniable. And with T behind bars, their house of cards had finally collapsed. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. There are days when I still wonder how things might have been if my dad had treated me differently. If he'd seen me as more than just a backup plan. But those thoughts don't stick around long. I know better now. Some people aren't meant to stay in your life, even if they're family, especially if they're family. The hardest part of all this? Realizing I was worth more than they ever gave me credit for. My whole life, I'd been bending over backward, trying to prove to my dad that I was good enough, that I deserved the same love and respect that he got. But in the end, it wasn't about me at all. It was about them. Their need to protect their perfect image, their golden child, no matter the cost. And I wasn't willing to pay that price anymore. So now, here I am. I've got my life back, free from their toxicity, and I'm moving forward. I've learned to be my own support system, to rely on the friends and family who truly care about me. It's not easy rebuilding your life after your own family tries to tear it apart, but it's possible, and it's worth it. As for my dad, D and T, I don't think about them much anymore. Last I heard, they were struggling to keep their heads above water. The legal fees for T's case drained whatever savings they had left. And my dad's job prospects aren't looking great after his employer found out about the whole drug scandal. They've been left with the fallout of their own choices, and I've washed my hands of it. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't control how people treat you, but you can control how you respond. My dad and Dee made their choice when they decided to protect T at all costs, and I made mine when I chose to stand up for myself and walk away. In the end, I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who support you, without asking you to sacrifice yourself for their mistakes. It's about the people who love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. And for the first time in my life, I'm finally surrounding myself with the kind of people who actually care. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.